Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my friends at Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. They have a bunch of tools from their instant quote calculator that let you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support. Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. You can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials, and the company has also printed many successful Kickstarter campaigns, and we love to talk about Kickstarter campaigns here, and some of them you may have even heard about on this very show. A bunch of my friends have used Mixum, and so it's really cool on that front, and they provide services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter and not harder, head over to Mixum.com, and listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. That's Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. And so without further ado, I have comic creator Ben Krieger. So welcome to the show. Hopefully I got your name right.
Nailed it.
So I'm super excited to have you on because you got a lot of stuff going on. I know that I've been wanting to get you on for a while at this point. I think almost 6 months now, and you've had a lot of delays with your Kickstarter. And so let's sort of talk about it a little bit. And it's Frontier Forever. Tomorrow's yesterday. And there's a lot of stuff going on in your world because it is very much a plug-and-play type world. So what is your world before we dive into the Kickstarter?
Yeah, it is a little bit too big sometimes, but the best way to say it is there's a book that is already out that's on Amazon, and that's like a 300-page novel. And this is an anthology that tells like the extreme backstory before the novel. So it's starting right now, and they call this Old Earth. Present time is Old Earth, and it starts there, and it goes through like huge time jumps forward to where the main story takes place. So it's like answering a bunch of backstory questions. Each story has its own set of characters, and they're dealing with their own issues, but it's all related. Like it tells a through story, and it's probably the coolest thing I'll ever write. I'm so in love with it. And if we get stretch goals, it'll be 12 stories instead of 11. We already got the 11th story unlocked. We're looking for the 12th one. So please check out that campaign. But it's also for Regenesis, which is a limited comic series. It's going to be 8 episodes or 8 issues now. And that is in between. It's the direct prequel to the novel. And
yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
So it's a lot.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff I want to break down here because obviously,
if you want to look at the campaign, if I should talk more about the campaign already, yeah, I mean, I'm very. Each story also has its own creative team. There's a few colorists and letters that overlap. Gian Maria Orlandi doing Regenesis 2. He's going to be on that series all the way through. But then I have Dan Schmidt, who I think has been on your show. Did he come on here?
I don't know if he was on.
Well, he's absolute dream to work with. Dan, I'm sure you'll watch this at some point. He really is just like incredibly talented and incredibly communicative. Dan, I love you, dude. You're fantastic. So glad I have you on this project.
There's a lot of stuff going on here that I want to break down a little bit because obviously you have created a very, very cool world with the I'm getting the name right. Wow, it just slipped my head with Frontier Forever. And so I'm super curious about Frontier Forever because obviously, as you stated, there's a book, there's obviously the Regenesis comic, and now there's Tomorrow's Yesterday. And so where did this idea even come from? Because obviously you got a lot of moving parts, where Regenesis is becoming an 8-issue comic series. This is an anthology. You got a book that dives into a little bit more details, and obviously that's a novel. And so where did this idea come from? Because you created a very, very big world. And it's very, very interesting. This is one of the things that I am super interested about it, because I know that you could add stories now into this at any given point, and you can, I guess, it's very much plug and play, as I was stating.
Yeah, where,
and so where did all this come from? Because that's what I think people want to know. And then we're going to obviously dive into some of these stories a little bit more in depth.
That's a great question, because I can talk about that shit all day. The real origin of it was I was in college and I wrote a short, I think it was a screenplay class or something, but I wrote a short animated thing about one of the robots, a droid from Star Wars, Lady Liberty, and Captain Planet being college roommates. And the three of them kind of, obviously it changed a lot, but they changed into the main characters in here. Frontier Forever, the name is, pretty central to it, because Space, the Final Frontier was a big part of my sci-fi upbringing. But like the cool thing about that phrase is like space goes on forever. The frontier is never ending. Like space is the final frontier because it goes on forever. But this story takes place after everything's been colonized. Like, obviously space is still infinite and you're going to be able to go out, but there's just so much abundant life in the universe that this story, The New Frontier, is kind of back in the beginning. And that's what the Regenesis bit is about. It's like beginning again from the center. And like you said, there are a whole bunch of opportunities for plug and play stories or spin-offs or whatever you want to call them. They, they go there. There's just so many points in time that you can start from. And if you, I don't want to give any spoilers, but if you read the main story, all 12 of these stories like mean very specific things that are related to it. Like it's all interconnected. If you like massive, confusing sci-fi, this is the guy.
And so obviously, I want to dive into this, and I promise we're going to get to the Kickstarter. Because I do want to talk about
bring it on. I seriously, I can talk about the.
So I love this type of concept, and I love these things where it's very much plug and play. Like Black Alpha, I thoroughly enjoy Black Alpha with Tom Rash, and there's a variety of other things that I thoroughly enjoy that are like this. And so obviously one of the things I think, and the best place to start, we're doing it slightly out of order for a reason, is Regenesis, because it's focusing on pretty much humanity has been enslaved, and then they get their freedom from robots. They're still pretty upset about it.
Yeah, real.
It is rational, and I mean, and they've been rewarded across the entire galaxy, for lack of a better word, as far as obviously the frontier is obviously expanding, but they've been rewarded as an apology and reparations of massive, awesome technology. Exactly. And Earth has pretty much politically protected itself with minimizing and introducing technology.
You're right, but it's not that they've really protected themselves. It's that the government has like hermetically sealed it in a bubble. They call it the embargo, and it's just they don't let any new technology onto the planet. So you're right, but the people on the planet are not in control of it at all. It's very much like there's a lot of Western elements in this whole story. This is very much like a Native American reservation. Like they're much more trapped there than they are, liberated from technology. There's a lot of like theology that goes on in the people who live there, and there's a lot of different communities who are trapped in Earth. It's not all the Native American characters who are born on Earth, and then there are the city people who are basically like we call them souls in the series. It's like you have your mind is uploaded to the cloud, and that can make bodies wherever. Those are the people who live in the cities on Earth, are have souls up in space. But then there are also the migrant laborers who are just like Oompa Loompas. They're totally slaves. It really sucks to be a migrant laborer on Earth. There are all these different marginalized communities, and it's a big American metaphor in a lot of ways.
And so obviously, and this is humanity on Earth is relatively declining. I think it's pretty obvious that this isn't exactly working out. There's a lot of groups that are doing somewhat well to some degree, and others are doing pretty bad, and everybody is sort of trapped there, as you stated. And I'm not too sure who sends down, but they send down a Athena-class Marshal, and she has a robotic, arm that has like a sidekick AI, and she's got a great body and sort of Western, I guess, and then very much Wild West like. And I don't know if she's supposed to figure out what's going on down there, if she's supposed to fix it. It gets a little wonky what she's doing, but it's her journey down there and seeing what Earth looks like exactly, sort of sneaking in there and figuring out what's going on. And it's very, very interesting because we're sort of seeing what Earth looks like in this world through her eyes and her journey. And so what prompted all of this? Because you have a world of Earth, but we're experiencing it as readers through her actions in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I don't. Maybe I should spoil it, but at the end of Regenesis 1, she's a very conflicted character. So she is the baddest fighter of all time. She's like, the embargo has like a genetic ceiling, so you can only be so strong and smart and whatever. She's the absolute apex, and she's born full grown, has memories that are trained her to be the ultimate badass. She really is. She goes to Earth and she makes some really horrible mistakes. She does some bad things, like at the end of issue 1. And so you're not supposed to know what to think. She's like, she's definitely supposed to be doing good. She was born, the government is the one who spawned her. She's born to go and protect Earthlings and restore natural order, but nobody really knows what natural order is. But basically, she makes really bad choices. And I don't want to say it's like a redemption story. It's not about her being redeemed, but it is about figuring out why she did those things. And so, yeah, you mentioned briefly in her robot arm thing, there's an AI that, you think about, if these people really hate technology so much, why are they giving their number one law enforcement agent an AI partner? They hate AI. But that's part of why she's the shit. And she doesn't really integrate with her arm well. I can't spoil that part because it's different in the book and in Regenesis, but basically she's got a lot going on inside her head and she makes bad choices.
And the reason why I bring all this up is that we're experiencing, and I'm glad you wrote this natural order thing, because Earth is out of balance. I think it's a safe assumption here. Mm-hmm. And so obviously she's sort of supposed to fix that, and she's the top of the top, and she is in very much a Wild West environment. And, it gets super interesting where she's got some advantages, but clearly she doesn't have all the advantages. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And so it's just very, very cool when you experience this, because we as readers, and I think, you can start with Regenesis or the novel, because there's sort of this similar story. It's just your preferred medium where to start with. But, it's this idea. And one of them goes into, you can do certain things in a novel you can't do in a comic. I won't talk about that. But it's the idea that we're just thrown into this, and it's just it's super interesting, because I don't really know exactly where it's going per se, because in 8 issues, I mean, we're going to sort of solve some stuff, but we're not going to solve everything.
It's true. You'll have to read the book eventually. If you want to know everything, you're going to have to read them all. But I do want to make clear, the Marshall in the book and in Under the Shadow of the Plateau and Regenesis, they're different people. I will say that. It's not the same Marshall. So it's not like the comic is not a comic version of the book. It's a prequel. But yeah, it does not matter which one you read first. You're going to be confused no matter what. You're very much thrown into her situation. You're born at the same time she is. And it's just like, what is going on here? And why is she killing people?
And even to talk about the book, because obviously they're not the same people, but they follow similar tracks.
They look exactly the same. It's like the clone army from Star Wars. And you were talking earlier about like why starting it. I modeled most of it off of Dune and a bunch of my favorite Westerns, honestly. But a big part of it is also Star Wars. Like the coolest thing about Star Wars for me is starting once once Anakin's already turned. Like having him, that reveal is so epic. It really it's a big part of the structure for this too. That's not a spoiler though.
And so obviously, I think of Oblivion as well with
Mm,
Tom Cruise and I forget if it's Emily Blunt or
I think
it's
you're right. And
the
that's
other.
the movie that one changed titles a lot, didn't it? Didn't it have?
There's two movies that have a woman that looks similar. It's The Day After Tomorrow, which is All You Need Is Kill, the
All
modern
you,
version with Tom
that is
Cruise.
the one I was thinking. That there's another Tom Cruise that has.
There's something called Oblivion, and that one has Morgan Freeman. And both leads in the females, they look extremely similar, but they're different people. It's the craziest thing.
Huh,
And like both those movies came out within like a year of each other, and they're both phenomenal movies.
I'm not sure if I know which one Oblivion is. Then what is it?
Oblivion is basically that up a big computer is sucking up all the water off of Earth, saying they're going to transport it to
I did
Mars,
see
and
this.
it's really a computer dictating everything. And Tom Cruise and this other woman, they're all living in these things, controlling sectors that and then they're cloned massively because they're the best of the best. Essentially, these two people, and they're supposed to be monitoring and eliminating any threats. And it's very interesting when you talk about how well these people could be possibly cloned and all sorts of stuff. But this is totally an aside of all this. But
I
even
did see
going
that.
into
That's a good
this
movie.
about the novel, which is super interesting because obviously it's a different Marshall, but the
Mhm.
mission is very similar to it. And so that is something that is very, interesting because we get more insight into that. And so what was that like to write this novel and provide more insight into what's going on with that and all sorts of stuff and then because you could do
Well,
way more information in a novel.
yeah, well, different types of information. I mean, it is a totally different mode of storytelling because you can tell a lot of the stuff that's going inside their head that you can never do in comic books. Like you have to tell everything through action in comic books, and that's great. And you can tell a lot of things through action that you can't tell through prose. But I actually wrote the book first. I started with the book, and I had the story for. So this kind of is a spoiler, but if you start reading the book, it's not the um, the marshal in the book is investigating the death of the first marshal. The one in Regenesis is the first one ever to be made, and the one in the book is the second. So she's directly investigating the death of her predecessor. It's the only real. Other than that, they're identical. They're both born with the same body, given the same AI, given the same armor for their arm. It's it is very. I think the reason that you said threw me off is because my story is also very much like. I forgot what it was called again. What'd you say? Die again. What's it called?
It's either something like die another day. All you need is kill.
All You Need
Is
Is Kill is the book. Yeah, it's a lot like that because she is able to retain some memories from when she dies, but only if she gets to like a computer to download it. She doesn't if she doesn't remember anything from her death from her last upload or whatever to her next death. That part is erased, but she can remember some things. So and then also the government is messing with her memories, so it's it's really hard for her to figure out what's going on, as it's hard for the reader to figure out what's going on.
and so obviously this is that's it's I just lost my train of thought. It's and even to go into this because this sort of sets the tone a lot of what this all is with plug and play a little bit because obviously we sort of experience Earth for we're thrown into the Earth and then this sort of leads into the everything else that's going on because I don't want to ruin either of these projects because then this is sort of your third project which is Frontier Forever Tomorrow's Yesterday which
Mm-hmm.
is how we got here because this is sort of I don't want to say it's the end game because there's probably going to be, and if I know writers, and I'm taking a gamble here, it's this idea that there's going to be stuff after Regenesis and the
There's
book
so much
probably.
more. This is all still just the beginning.
And so, but what is that like to throw in, this entire thing, create the prequel because it's how we got here.
Yeah, I've been. This is my first two comic projects, Regenesis and Tomorrow's Yesterday, and I think that it was especially easy for me because I already knew the story because I had written the book. Like to write the book, I had all of this backstory ready, and I'm a very visual. I'm really severely dyslexic. It's very hard for me to write. It was way more challenging than writing the comic scripts because they just flowed right out of me. I'm a very visual thinker, and I already knew all of the details. Like the characters are already developed. All I have to do is, tell it from a first person's perspective. And I try my best in the book not to explain what happened before, to have the characters figure it out. And so this is it's going to be 132 pages for the first volume of Tomorrow's Yesterday. This is just volume 1. And I think it's around the same. I think it's like 140 pages for all of Regenesis, or 160 maybe. But it's just, it's a lot. But again, it's the tip of the iceberg because the story is just it just keeps going. It's very circular. So, the content has a lot of places to go. I'll actually give you a really cool spoiler. The second to last story in here is the Lost Chapters. That actually takes place in the middle of book 2, which is so far unreleased. There's just so many different places to branch off. Like there's unlimited content here.
And then obviously I want to dive into, the Tomorrow Yesterday, because obviously I don't want to ruin too much of Regenesis for those who haven't seen it, and even the book a little bit. But obviously, you've taken a very interesting approach with the Frontier Forever Tomorrow's Yesterday, where this is the beginning. I think it's 12 stories. You unlocked 11. You're probably going to unlock 12 relatively soon. And
God, I hope so.
It's sort of a bunch of different characters. Each chapter of this is a different character. It's a different section. It's a different piece, I guess, of the puzzle. It's also a little bit of a different time, I think, where I don't think anything is overlapping with time. And also, you have a bunch of different artists working on it. I think you did the majority of the writing on it.
Oh, yeah.
So
Volume 2 will have different writers, but this one is all me.
So I mean, the common thread is that you have basically created and put together, the entire writing, but then you have a bunch of different artists all having different, interpretations, as well as time doesn't overlap. So what was the setup with that? Because it's interesting how we got here and everything is spaced out.
Yeah, basically I had a lot of just writer's momentum, and I pumped out the script. It really, it just did not take me much time at all. And the learning curve for the rest of comic making, the writing for me was very easy. The rest of comic making was very, very hard. And I got very, very lucky with Gianmaria. He is the artist for, he draws or illustrates and colors Regenesis, and he's fantastic. He's an Italian gentleman. He's really, I'm incredibly lucky to have found him right off the bat. I actually did go through some other artists first, but he's in it for the long haul. And then for this, I knew I had this many stories and I could add more, but this is basically what I could afford to do, is what I thought I could pull off on Kickstarter. And the team is just incredible. Like I was saying, Dan Schmidt's doing the opening story. And that's the one that's called Last Days of Old Earth. That's where we're right here. And it's kind of, AI AI is actually not the most important part. The most important part is a chip in your head that lets you talk to computers. And that's what creates the AI that takes over later. But then the next one is it's actually a friend of Gianmaria's. It's Flora Gali, and she is fantastic. She has a very, it's one of the more character-driven stories. It's about a bunch of space miners, essentially, who are on the first expansion, when people are just going out into other systems. They've left our system, and I think it's the year 3000 something, and they're just setting up the first colonies. And so that's a really fun story. She's fantastic. Then the next one is what was When the Machines Take Over, and that's Rise of the Machines, and Horatio Boriati is the one in charge of that. And he has really, I hired him because of a drawing he did of a very cool DeLorean that was done in time travel style. And like, I knew this one had a lot of machines that he was going to get to draw blowing up. And that's a really, really fun story. Then is Captivity. So it's like once the machines have taken over, it's the humanity's last stand. They all, spoiler alert, everyone loses and they're enslaved by the machine race, but they have mechs. And it's like, when we're still in charge of really amazing technology and we're trying to fight the machine race. And the illustrator for that is Dima.
And one of the cool things too, and I was alluding to it, and I just rephrase it, I guess, is that what's cool about this, and what's fascinating is that obviously all these stories take place, and they're separated by hundreds or even thousands of years.
Yes.
And so it's very cool when you're writing, because what happens at the first introduction of technology, and then it takes 600 years, and you have another story and the situation's getting worse, you don't have to worry too much about those characters in that first story still being alive or really anything major that they've done beyond just the fact that, somebody invented, a new energy source. That energy source has to carry over to some degree or be improved upon, but it allows for a lot of writing freedom. But it also, you have to create what is known as a Bible. And I don't mean a religious Bible, but a character and a rule set Bible.
Canon Bible.
And so what is that? And this is why I call it plug and play in a lot of ways, because you've taken the entire world now, and now you just put in and say, okay, here are the guardrails, here's the boundaries. And it makes writing easy, but it also makes writing somewhat hard, especially when you're progressing in time to some degree, because you can't go backwards.
Mm-hmm. You've definitely thought about this a lot, and it's so great to hear you. I can't wait till you read the whole. You read Regenesis, but you didn't read the book, right?
I skimmed the book. I just didn't have time.
Yeah, I don't think I gave you enough time, but I like, you should read it, because like the things that you're cluing in here are exactly what I'm trying to like. You're my ideal reader, because like I honestly, I do appreciate all of these characters kind of being throwaway characters. They're not throwaway characters. They have their own series, but like, I don't have to worry about them because they're long dead by the time the next story takes place. But the reason that I love this anthology, and anthologies in general, honestly, is because they build upon each other. It's true. The characters are all dead, but like
but is this an
progression of the story?
I'm going to challenge you, and I don't mean to be,
What you got?
I don't view this as an anthology the same way I view Travis Gibb when he did, Cthulhu Invades Oz.
Because they're not linked together?
Because it's linked together, but it's looser. This is more linked together of being in a world. Or, Kara Prime, for instance. That, to me, is not an anthology, because we're on a planet and these stories haven't crossed each other yet, and they're all separate. But this story, to me, is that this is how we got to Regenesis. Mm-hmm. And so obviously we're pretty far off away from Regenesis with this book per se, but it gives you clue in over the 12 chapters. Okay, the situation is that they got a piece of technology, and they got another piece, and they got another piece. And then on chapter 6, we say, oh, this is where this is going now. Mm-hmm. And so I view it more of a bunch of one-shots that give us clue into a bigger thing. Versus an anthology. This is not, to me, a traditional anthology.
They're too interlaced to be an anthology. I don't. Okay, so I think. Have you ever read Kurt Vonnegut? Much of him, like any of his short story books?
Yeah, I know who he is. Yes.
So like I consider those anthologies, even though they're all by the same author, and the common thread is probably more like the Cthulhu Invades Oz kind. It's like, the common theme is very, very, very loose. I don't think anyone has challenged this on being an anthology.
No. It's very much like Kara Prime, where I don't view it as an anthology.
You're not, though. I don't understand. Like, why does that disqualify us?
No. Because I think an anthology, I think it actually underplays it, because what you're doing, and then the way I view it, is I view this as, okay, this is how we got here, and that these stories are providing an answer to this world of what happened and how Regenesis happened. And I don't find it where I find it much like Grim Fairy Tales. They're doing a lot of one shots. That to me is not an anthology because all that stuff is playing into their world. You've created a universe. I find anthologies don't really play into a universe. You have a big universe that you've created, and I think an anthology underplays that tremendously.
So would you just call I love anthologies. I think that I think it's a very, I don't want to be disqualified because I love them so much, but I think I understand what you're saying though. So would you just call this a graphic novel?
So I mean, I would call it a graphic novel that is very much world building and it's legitly enhancing your world, because the way I would recommend your series to somebody, and this is just me, is saying read the book or read Regenesis first, because that's going to give you a baseline, and then I would read this secondly on how we got there. And to me, this is the answer, saying, okay, we're enhancing the world. It's like a booster D&D pack. And so
it's like the really thick rule pack. This is like all of the deep lore.
And so the way I see it is that I see this as an expansion of all the answers. And look, I've played video games and all that stuff, and I love the concept, but I think an anthology doesn't exactly project this, because I feel like an anthology doesn't mean this is canon, and this is very much canon in a lot of ways. And I find this just, you're adding almost a bigger engine to the unit in a lot of ways. You're adding a lot of gears into the chain of what this is going to be. And what's going to happen, because I just had this conversation with Ralph Tedesco, where Zenescope, and I'm a huge Zenescope fan, they're now bringing in a bunch of their world components that weren't connected, and they're connecting all of it. And now you have a big machine that's utilizing a lot of gears, where something like Zodiac and Death Force is now relevant in Zenescope because of a book they brought in when they haven't touched those series in 6 years. And so that's what I view this, is that this is connecting, and it's really, really well done in a lot of ways. And as you inch, and then even if you add a whole second thing and sort of go back and go into increments of in between some of the stuff you told, you're building out a big machine in a lot of ways.
I got two really mainstream examples that I think will clarify this completely for me. Is the Animatrix an anthology? And what's the new Marvel show where it's all What If? Is that those aren't actually? I know the answer to that one. Those aren't anthology episodes.
Yeah. So
what about Animatrix? You saw that, right?
Yeah. Oh man, the Animatrix, that's
an anthology, isn't that? I love that fucking DVD. Like I love each one of those stories so much. It's an anthology, and it's all like the reason it's so good is because it all feeds into the Matrix. And I think they did say that it's all canon, but it wouldn't even matter to me if it wasn't.
So the Blade Runner stuff is good, but I don't view that as an anthology.
The Do Androids Dream?
No. Leading into 2044. The anime stuff, the shorts.
True.
So it's tricky because I don't view this as an anthology the same way, where I view an anthology as a collection of short stories that usually aren't connected.
Connected.
This is directly connected to Regenesis. And while it does take leaps and bounds, which I think is brilliant, and I think that's what I like about your book, and that's what I like about this project, is that you're connecting and you're providing a lot of stuff into this, where we have 11 chapters, and the first chapter is like, okay, boom. But then if you read chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you start to connect the dots in a lot of ways. This is very much like, have you read Roboticlips?
I don't know if I have.
This is very similar to Roboticlips, where the entire thing is that, technically speaking, Roboticlips is probably an anthology to some degree. And I guess this is an anthology too. I'll surrender my point a little bit, because Roboticlips is a bunch of short stories.
I'm attached to the anthology. Like, I've always wanted to write an anthology, so I want to say that I am, but I'm not sure I'm not sure which way. Yeah, Roboticalypse looks tight.
And,
it's from 2011.
Yeah, and so it's a bunch of short stories, and some of these characters are over and over and over again. But it starts with how we got from like Patient Zero, World War Z. Technically speaking, World War Z is probably an anthology, but it's also very much how we got here, and that's what this is to me. Is it's how we got here, and I think it's a brilliant concept. And so, but I don't want to get too much in the weeds because I really like the concept of it.
But what about for World War Z is a great example too, because that has more interconnected characters. I think that one is I would question whether that was an anthology just because it really is one. It's like watching a movie. Like I understand, I didn't like the movie, but I understand why they wanted to make a movie because it's very cinematic and it's
my thing about your book and where this is going. What I'm trying to get across is that the characters aren't you can break the characters away. But the question that we're answering and then what we're providing, because once you read this, Regenesis changes. The book changes. Your novel that you wrote changes. Once you read, tomorrow, yesterday, it's tomorrow. I forget how it's tomorrow, it's yesterday. It changes because now you have more information.
Yeah, but it's
questioning if it's an anthology. But I think it's brilliant because what you're doing is we're getting right into the weeds of it. And that's what's really cool is that if you haven't read anything yet from you, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, because this is why I was excited like 6 months ago when I was looking you up and finding out what you were doing, because I'm like, oh, snap, he's doing something that is very, very interesting where you are world building on steroids.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, it's what I have the most of. It's just the world is so fresh in my head, and I want to pump as much out of it as I can. And to your point about reading, I don't think that reading Tomorrow's Yesterday first will damage your experience for reading the other ones at all. It does influence it, but only on the same level as like rereading it will. Like rereading the novel is like a really good idea because.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if I'm to recommend the reading order to somebody, I think they're going to get the most if they read Regenesis or the novel first.
Yeah, you're definitely right.
And then they go backwards because now they have a baseline. There's a concept of how you should watch certain movies, right? I mean, the Star Wars debate. There's a great example where you could watch the machete version of Star Wars. And you could rewatch basically episode 4, and then you watch 1, 2, 3 as memories of Anakin, and then you watch 5 and 6. And that's a very different interpretation.
Is that what you subscribe to? What's your preferred watch order?
I don't know. It's I only watch 4, 5, and 6, and then I can't do anymore. I
do the release. If I'm gonna watch the other ones, I do the release order. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3.
I can't. I stopped at I saw 7, 8, 9. It was bad, and I can't.
7 wasn't that bad. I'll go out. I'll be bold and say I really thought that they were going to turn it around. I thought 7 was pretty good. 8, 9 was my dick. It was awful.
9 was a disaster, and 8 was we're stuck on a cruise ship.
Yeah, I couldn't stand either of those movies.
Me and my friend are eventually going to do an episode, and we're going to have this very, very civil debate about number 8. And he likes 8. We agree 9 was bad. I thought 7 was better than 8. And again, this is not what this is about. This is about your book. So obviously, I want to talk about your book.
Hey man, you said you were excited to have me on your show. I was excited to be on your show, mostly because I saw that you were a local, and I was like, props to Washington D.C. But no, I can talk about sci-fi all day. It's like my favorite thing. It's like literally my favorite thing.
And also what I like about this project too is that there's a lot of artists who worked on this book. Obviously, I think the book's a hardcover, right? Or is it a soft cover?
Right now, it's just going to be a perfect bound. But if we get a stretch goal, I'll put it into a nice hardcover.
So I didn't know. I obviously. Going through writing everything, I'm going to miss something. That's why I asked. But I don't think I'm too explicit about in the campaign either. But it's like it's a cost thing. I put a lot of money into this. Like everything that was from this is my second Kickstarter. The first one, it's all spent on art for this, everything. So
I got to do the minimal printing for the main version, unless we get, I think it's 12,000 that goes to hardcover.
So that's what I was going to ask, is that obviously there's a bunch of questions. Obviously, finances matter when you're producing a project. I haven't entered the Kickstarter realm at the moment. I got obviously this project, but even going further economically, it is difficult sometimes to come with money and funds and even just a good idea in that regard. And the way I would want to do it is I would want to go all out. I would need like 10K in cash to do a Kickstarter the way I want to do it. And I
for your show? For your show, or what are you trying to produce?
If I was to do a comic, just because I am a variant type of guy, and I either go big or I don't go at all. Go big or go home. My attitude.
Do you have something written already?
I have something in my head, and I have a premise, but again, it's not about me; it's about you. So it's this idea that when you have a lot of artists, and it's just paying your artists, it's the financing of artists. Also, when you have 20 plus artists, somebody might bail, and then you run into those problems because just statistically, more people means more of that occurs. And even just finding people. And so what has that been like? Because now you're not just running a Kickstarter, you're managing people too.
Yeah, don't let me complain about this part for too long. So like I love my team now, but it's been a journey getting here. The finance, I'm also not saying that the financing is easy. It's definitely a very difficult part, but the hardest part is communicating with the team. There's just so many people, and COVID happened. So that really we had a lot of delays due to COVID. Fortunately,
because we were speaking about this on Facebook, and I think you put up a question, and I don't think anybody was nasty to you, because it wasn't a nasty driving question saying I'm not going to pay somebody, but
I know what you're talking about.
So I'm not going to name names, but you nobody was mean, so it wasn't that type of issue, but it was a real concern where it's just that, okay, an artist sort of sandbagged you, I guess, and wasn't doing the art, or was missing deadlines, and then you had to say, do I just hire another artist because I got to get this thing done, and this person can do 9 pages in a week, and I'm going to pay them, and then what do I do with this other person because they're not responding to me? And it's not that the person wasn't responding to you and they missed your thing because they had an emergency on a Monday and then they got back to you on Tuesday. It was more like they didn't respond to you for like 3 weeks.
No, we had a bunch. I mean, I had I'm not going to name names either, and I didn't name names in that post, but a few of the artists that are still on my team did not respond to me for weeks, and it was because of COVID, and I'm still super glad to have them on my team. That one that I mentioned, he disappeared. And I actually, in my post, I was careful not to say he or she, but it was a he. He disappeared. And then once he realized that he had been fired and replaced, he finally starts texting me back and is like, hey, where's my money? And why am I not working on this project anymore? And it was just like extremely offensive because I had been bullying him to try to get him to contact me. I had already paid him money, and it's like, I was just so offended. I probably shouldn't have posted that at all, but it was really upsetting at the time. But yeah, like I've had to. He was not the only artist that I had to let go. There was other artists that didn't work out for this too. But I for the billionth time, I want to make sure I shout out all my artists before this is done, because I'm incredibly proud of my team.
And so even to talk about that, because obviously, when you do a Kickstarter, you're outlaying money, when you're doing that, and even just managing and even just finding artists, because obviously it's hard to find people. I'm learning as a, interviewer, is that, a lot of people are now coming out on how they look, as far as, good people, bad people. And I was on, I've been on a bunch of people's shows, and we've all had this conversation saying, who can you trust in the comic world? Mm-hmm. And it's becoming a very complicated thing. And I think it's become a lot more complicated. And I'm having this question, is that who's been good to me and who hasn't been? And a bunch of people are seeing this and watching, and I'm going to be posting in groups and see this. The people who've been good to me, they know it. And some people who think they've been good to me haven't been. And other people who have been horrific to me, they might not know it. And I'm not going to name names, but it's this idea that it's getting harder and harder and harder to figure out that. And even when you're finding artists, I would imagine it's getting harder and harder at this point, because I don't know about you, but the running away with money, I feel like is popping up more, or it's just being noticed more. I don't know which it is.
I have that same chicken egg. I don't know either, because I only started this comic endeavor last April.
So I've been doing this for 8 years in a variety of formats. I did 5 or 6 years of pre-recorded. I just started live stuff and doing a lot more interviews.
And you feel like it's getting more prominent? Because when I started, there was a lot of talk about it already, being like, be very careful, don't pay anyone up front. And I like to pay my artists up front. I think that that's a big part of how to find someone to trust, is make sure that they know that they're valuable. And it doesn't always, I have been burned, but at the same time, that's the reason that I think that everyone who works for me enjoys it. So it's a two-way street. And now that I have these artists,
for me,
I don't have to shop anymore. I have them on the table.
No.
Sorry,
what were you saying? I'm sorry. I really interrupted.
No, I was just, I just, once you find somebody to work, like, so with this anthology, now I have 12 artists that I know how to work with. I don't have to shop for 12. I have all these people ready to roll. It's so great building a team. Once you find someone that you trust, it's so good. But the original curating of art is very labor intensive. You really got to shop around.
Because the way I'm seeing it is that I'm now starting to see a lot of people's true colors. And maybe it's because I do such volume that this is now starting to come out a lot more. And maybe because I've done essentially, I don't know what, the end of this year is going to be probably around 270 for the last 2 years, is where we're going to be in that ballpark. And that's almost, and I guess most people that I know either do, 100 a year, or they do 50 a year, or they do 75. So I'm doing anywhere from 4 to 5 times the norm of what people are doing. And I'm not trying to brag by any stretch of the imagination. But when you start seeing it, you start seeing who's good, who's bad really quickly, because you start asking around. And also it all depends on when you have hour-long conversations or 2-hour-long conversations with people, things come out and you start seeing it. And then also this art stuff and people bailing out. I don't know if it's always been that way or it's just being spoken about more. And I'm very confused on it, because it's something that I'm seeing now is happening a lot more. And I know more people who have experienced this happening and being burned. And it's a very weird segment in indie right now.
It sucks. And I've worked in a variety of industries, and it's not unique to comics, for sure. There are bad contractors everywhere. I think that because so much of this work is online, you're working physically in your house when you're illustrating, but because so much of the networking and the production organization stuff is, primarily online, I think that's, if people are walking from jobs more, or if people are just disappearing more, it's because of this online work environment where you don't have to worry about, seeing somebody on the street. You just disappear off the internet, and then they can't track you down. It's very frustrating.
That is true. That is true. And also, I think it's just, I think people sometimes are just operators in this segment. And I also think people realize and say, oh my God, I just raised $50,000 in Kickstarter. And I think people also view that where, and I'm going to ask you a very, very, blunt question. But I think where the point's going to be is that if you raise 12 grand on it, you're not making 12 grand on the book.
No.
And I think that's a common misconception. My sponsorship, I'm not making what my sponsor has granted me. I'm not making what everybody thinks I'm making. But
that's your production cost. Yeah, congratulations again on that, by the way. I saw that
8 years in the making. 8 years in the making. So, but that's what people don't understand, is that there are expenses, and also all the money that goes from buying me a coffee, which I have, and other things like that, and you cash at me, all that stuff goes right back into production. I am not taking a distribution from this. You know, maybe I'll go buy myself an energy drink if I get, if I got a sponsorship that was $2,000.
I hope you celebrated it a little bit.
I'd probably maybe, take like $10 of that and buy myself a Frappuccino.
I hope you celebrated a little bit.
Or I go out for ice cream. But I think people get where I'm going with this, where all the money with my sponsorship goes back into this. And same thing with a lot of Kickstarters is that's what's going on. And not to mention the real money in Kickstarter is not a Kickstarter.
That was one of the first big surprising things when I was learning Kickstarter is I was pricing my things out, and I never, I knew that the first and second and third were probably never going to make money. Like that break even was the goal. And that's whatever the final goal is. I could just look it up, but the printing the Tomorrow's Yesterday as a hardcover is the final goal, because that's like my break even point. It's where I can safely spend money again.
So the goal of Kickstarter in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, is that if I'm to run a Kickstarter, the whole play for me, if I was running a Kickstarter for this, or if I have a comic that I may or may not have, or I might be working with somebody, is that we're going to fund it. It's going to cover our initial printing, and then maybe if I have 2 or 3 partners, everybody puts in an equal amount, and we get a bunch of books printed additionally, because it's not as expensive to print it, so that our initial printing costs or a little bit more are covered, and then our stretch goals are covered and other things are covered. Our artists are paid for, money that we put up front is taken care of, and then following that, you then go to cons, and that's where you really get your back payday if your product is good. But that's the whole thing of where I think the real money is in Kickstarter. And I have a very different solution and strategy, because I come from the comic book investing world, and I come from, that's what I do on eBay, is I sell, collectible comic books. And I buy a book for 20, I'll sell it for 50. And so if I'm to run a Kickstarter, and if I'm to run a Kickstarter, there's going to be a bunch of variants that are not on that Kickstarter that I'm bringing to cons. And I'm going to have like 200 print runs that I'm selling for $50 that you can only buy from me, and it's going to be my variant. And I'm going to tell my partners, if I have an artist partner and it's an equity deal, I'm going to say do the same thing, because now this is how we're going to make our real money. Because if you have 200 books and you're selling them for 50 a piece, well, that's a lot of money, and the printing on that wasn't expensive. And even if it cost you $1,000 to hire an artist to do it, there's a lot of money to be made where you could legitimately turn $2,500 into 10 grand. If you know what you're doing.
If you know what you're doing, yeah, and if you have that demand. Yeah, I've never taken these for retail. I still issue 1 of Regenesis has never been for retail. So the only people who have it are through Kickstarter. And I definitely appreciate you comic traders. I've never been able to get into that industry, but these comics, none of these comics are ever going to be reprinted. Like if I have to reprint it for a Kickstarter campaign, I might, but I don't really see that being an issue, because when Regenesis 8 is done, that's going to be printed as a trade. That will be a beautiful hardcover, and I'm never going to do the single issues again. So these, if you get in on this Kickstarter, you're at the very, very beginning of the entire Frontier Forever series. Like there's going to be a ton of it.
Let's talk about that, because obviously, so I'm going to comment on what I think, and this is just my opinion, is that your world is plug and play, which means that it can be picked up by a network, it could be picked up by an RPG company, it could be picked up, by a mobile game or a video game company that needs something. And so that's one of the things about your series and your world that's super awesome, not to mention that you could have 15 series spin out of that and spin out of this, and you could go into a whole bunch of stuff, and you could play in, year 200 and have a 4-issue miniseries if you really like some of the characters and people are flocking to these characters. Well, they might be dead technically in the whole timeline.
No, the one that they're going to get addicted to is Rhodes and Lincoln. Rhodes is the tribesman, and Lincoln is his gorilla lion hybrid buddy.
But you know where I'm going with.
I definitely do. Yeah, no, that's where I mean, the dream is to become an animated show on Netflix or any.
That's the other thing too, is
I
that
want an animated show, and I know exactly the script that they'll choose, because I mean, they yeah, you're right. It's plug and play. They can choose to start wherever they want, but they're going to go with the characters, like you said. And I know exactly it's going to be Rhodes and Lincoln.
and so this is what I'm leading into is obviously rewards, because you have a bunch of digital stuff, and the digital stuff is always going to be accessible, because digital is easy to send out a digital file to somebody for $5, or having it on Comixology or something like that. That's an easy solution for people. And I think getting this digitally is always going to be accessible.
Yeah, and our digital rewards are super cheap this time, so I hope people pick that up. But all the physical rewards are really cool too. I got so much swag. Not the cool kind, just the nerdy kind. Where did I put that?
And so obviously this is something that's cool, is that so there's a bunch of digital stuff, and the digital stuff is relatively cheap, which I like, because obviously people want to support projects, but people don't want to drop some serious money sometimes. And I'm sometimes in that position where I legitimately want to just pay like $10 for a digital book, or $12, and I don't want to pay $50, because some stuff gets priced out. There are Kickstarters that I am priced out at. The first lowest tier is $30, and I just can't support that. Not because the project's not good, but just economically, it makes no sense for me to support.
And it's addictive too. There's so many good comic books, and like I have to only get the.
Well, we're going to talk about that, but I want to table that for about 5 seconds, because obviously I do want to continue talking about the rewards. You got a bunch of swag stuff, and then obviously some stretch goals is out there, but then you could get the whole digital Regenesis Digital 2, digital catch-up. You could get a physical Regenesis 2. I think you get a number 1 Regenesis as well, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think the coolest I think it's $24 now that the early bird stuff is done. It's $24 to get everything. It's a digital copy of everything. 24 is the most you can spend to get all the digital stuff. And
then obviously the physical stuff is very cool. And I have some of this stuff up here right here. So obviously this sort of gives an idea of what you can get physically. And then there's a bunch of other cool swag like this up there that I think you were showing. And so very, very cool to that degree. And then you get into stuff like this, where it's obviously a hoodie and the backpack. And so there's a lot of cool stuff with this, where
I get a physical backpack here too. Yeah, the backpack. This is a one of a kind right now. I've only got the proof, but it is so gorgeous. It really, I can't tell you how happy I am with this thing. And I work for a public school, and all the kids are very jealous of me. They're like, "That's a very unique backpack." And now you guys do it too.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just trying to shop my wares. I'm not a very good salesperson, but I really get excited about this stuff. Did you see that? I don't know if the hole punch or the press thing. I've got one of these presses. I'm going to make these really cool ID cards. One of the coolest, actually, let me pimp that real quick. One of the coolest rewards for this is you can join the California Sunrise Gang, which is a labor gang, and we're going to print these little ID cards that are just like wallet-sized IDs that will have an illustration by. You'll have to talk to me about which illustrator will be doing yours, but it's just you get your face on a badge, and it'll be printed and minted, and it's going to be really, really nerdy and cool.
And so obviously there's some other stuff too, where I think there's like a plush Marshall package, there's a collector's package. I think you're also offering, a retail package, I think.
Yeah, for retailers, it's just $100 pledge, and the $100 will be whatever merchandise or copies of the comic. It'll just be applied to your purchase at the retailer's price. You get a steep discount.
And so obviously that's out there, and that's figuring out, and I'm sure that the details are all going to be worked out at a separate level, and I'm getting into that sector, so I'm very much aware of a bunch of stuff that happens at that level, and also access and also, wholesaling and all that stuff. And it's complicated if you want to do it legally. So please do it legally.
I mean, wait, I don't actually see what the legal pitfall is. Why is it complicated?
Oh, when you buy wholesale, you need a wholesale license in some states.
Interesting. I had no idea.
If you're buying from a distributor, so if I'm buying from a company like Diamond, I need a wholesale license, and I'm in the process of applying for one. Because there's certain indie comic distributors that like, yeah, we got no problem selling to you. You just need your license. And in Connecticut, it's only $100, but it's just figuring out the application.
Interesting.
Figuring out the sales tax, because when you buy wholesale, you don't pay tax on the wholesale.
Oh, that's why. Oh, yeah. I'm obviously I'm going to pay my taxes. I'll obviously pay my taxes.
So if you wholesale to me, and I have a license, I don't pay taxes on the wholesale.
I still have to pay taxes on it, right?
I don't know if the wholesaler pays taxes on it either, because the taxes are collected when it's sold. So if I buy an item for $5, so if you wholesale me a book for and it's normally $10, but you wholesale to me for 50% off, I'm not paying taxes to you.
That's interesting.
But when I sell it for $10, it's double the taxes, but I didn't pay taxes the first round. So it's actually more advantageous if I pay taxes to some degree up front sometimes. Yeah. But then again, also, it becomes complicated, then I might be taxed double. So that's why you have a wholesale license.
And do you have a sole proprietorship? How are you?
So I don't. So I'm in the middle of applying for a wholesale license right now. So when I'm going to be dealing with an indie comic company, I just basically place an order for whatever books I want to sell on my eBay store. That's how I distribute. And so it's just my eBay business. And so I don't have any like exclusivity, but I can sell and do my comic stuff, and then I just sell it, and it affects my other merch because I'm bringing certain people in, and they might want certain other things, and I could ship it that way. It's just another expansion of my business, and so I don't know exactly, and so it's just my eBay business, which is it's not an LLC, but I don't really need one right now.
I ended up starting a sole proprietorship for this just because it was so. I didn't want to get it confused with all of my regular income, and it's not. It was free. I didn't have to pay anything to get it, but I'm dreading the day that I start making enough money where I actually have to worry about it. Like right now, it's very simple. I'm just in the red enough where I don't have to worry about it.
There is certain things that when it takes off, that I have to form a limited liability company.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why is that company is going to invite problems in. But again, I don't think you need to create one for every little thing, just because it's not that complicated. eBay does all my records essentially, give or take.
Yep. God, yeah, there are such great things about internet commerce. Like I would have been able to assemble this team or hire this team, and they're from all over the world. And I don't have a business degree, but I'm definitely running a business. I have 20 employees. They're contractors, but it's hard.
Do you have 20 employees, or do you have 20 contracts?
Contractors. I have 0 employees, but it's still a lot of work.
No. I was an independent contractor working, so I was treated like an employee.
No, these are all everyone here's got a work for hire contract.
And so therefore they are very much an independent contractor set on terms, and it's great because it works, and they know exactly what they're getting, and what they're getting, and everybody's happy, and it's great. And I don't want to dive too much into the finances of everything. I'm not going to push too hard, but it's tricky to run all this stuff. And then obviously there's just a bunch of rewards, and there's a bunch of different things, and the real money for you is printing a bunch of these books and going to cons.
Oh yeah, I honestly, I did not print enough to make a bunch of money there. And actually, I saw you on a show with Sam Quinton, and you guys were talking about how that's like he regrets in his early days not printing more of his early stuff, and I feel like I'm going to hit that eventually, but he's so successful. I really admire. He's a businessman. That guy is a monster.
So I think that was last night, and so I think, and we're probably going to want to talk about this in October, is that I think he also made the mistake of not raising the price of his early day stuff. Because
never raise your price if you don't have to.
No. Well, what I'm explaining is that if you only have 1,500 copies of your book, that's a limited print run. And so this is the whole discussion I've had with JP Roth and Ebas and Dom Teague about certain things. And when she had 100 of like Roth and certain books, those books are worth good money. The stuff before it came into Diamond, and even the Diamond print of A Theory of Magic, which is Sabine Reich and J.P. Roth, that book is an expensive book because it has a very low print run.
But they weren't indie when they started, were they?
Oh yeah,
at that point,
Roth,
these ones,
massive indie. She was like queen of indie for a while. And
so but I know exactly what you're saying, but like this is my first project. If people don't read it, they're never going to become valuable. I have to get people in on the cheap.
The track though is that if you have certain things that are really good art, and that you'd be surprised that if you have only a 500 print run of Regenesis and you listed that thing at $20, you'd be surprised who bite at it. I think a lot of people are.
If it's publicized that it's only 500.
Yeah, if you only printed 500, I think a lot of people are scared to raise prices because they're like, I have to compete because because they go along the lines of, okay, do I need to be the cheapest or the most expensive? Do I need to be in line with everybody, or do I need to say, screw this, I'm going to go be $20 because now there's a perceived value. And I think it's a big mistake to some degree where I think that saying, hey, let me go throw out $20. If somebody was willing to take a risk at a con and list their book at $20 at a catch and cover and say there's only 600 of these books out there, and once they're gone, they're gone. And
at a con, I 100% agree with you. I don't think I can get anyone to do it, without any. I didn't come to this with any audience. Like the people that are finding this, like I had incredibly great. Yeah, it is.
Kickstarter, people pay over on Kickstarter over.
They have to. That's the thing. My prices are as low as I did my budget on a business sense. I didn't base it on market price. I based it on this is what I need to get this printed, and otherwise I can't print it. So my prices are as low as they can go. And unfortunately, it is really expensive. Kickstarter, it only takes 8%, but like it really makes it much, much harder.
eBay takes 13.
Which one?
eBay takes 13%.
eBay takes 13. Yeah, like that is such a huge margin. Like that's just awful.
But it's built in, and it affects my negotiation power.
It definitely does.
Look, I give up a little bit on the eBay, but it's tricky, and you need to factor that in, and it's super interesting. But obviously, I was speaking with Travis and Chuck and Sam, and he's coming on in October, and so it's super interesting. And I think he has a fair point of not printing more, but if you print more and more and more every time, and there's a company that used to print 250 and they raised it to 350 for a certain book, and they raised it to 400, and now they're at 500, and it's a $10 book. But when you keep adding more covers in, and now I understand printing a book is expensive to some degree, but you're now devaluing. Because we started at 350, we went up to 400 and 500, and guess what? I move my money where I'll play every once in a while with one of those books, but I've come to the conclusion as a business that on my eBay store, those $10 books are not as valuable as they once were back in February.
Yeah, 100. That's a comic collecting. I mean, this is another tangent, but are you into NFTs at all?
So I understand NFTs, but I am more of a straight crypto guy.
My buddy was a really hard sports card trader, and he's been preaching the NFT sports card packages because of pretty much exactly what you're talking about. Is like if they print more, your value goes down. It's just that's supply and demand. So like with the NFT, you have this kind of artificial limit to supply. It's like every one of them is unique, but at the same time, another one could just be created with slightly different content. It's weird. I haven't got into it yet.
I'm not into NFTs. I'd rather own the straight crypto just because there's more I can do with straight crypto than I can do with an NFT. But at the same time, I am playing some games right now that I do earn crypto, and that crypto can be utilized to buy some NFTs.
Yeah.
And so I'm playing these games on my app and my phone and on my iPad, and maybe I'm earning like 10 cents a day in cryptocurrency, but it'll add up if you play it long enough for the next like year.
It depends which one it is too. All the places I like NFTs are more similar to comic books or any collectible than they are to crypto. Crypto is just the only currency you can use to buy the NFTs. The NFTs, I think of them exactly the same way I do collectibles. Like cards is what comes to mind first, but comics too.
So NFTs are very similar to baseball cards, football cards, Pokemon cards, which are the three hottest things. And then even going further into that, comics are very similar to that. Yeah. And then Pop Funko collecting is very similar to that. And there's real money in all this stuff. And that's why Kickstarter is so interesting right now, because obviously the next frontier is indie. It's the idea. And I've spoken about this too, and we didn't get to it too much last night on that show. But, I'm obviously in that sector. I have a lot of assets that need to be unloaded and loaded back up, and I'm buying and moving comics, and you never know what's worth money. I mean, I could tell you a story that back in 2013 or 14 on Free Comic Book Day at Midtown Comics, they were giving away Ultimate Fallout 4s for free. So in the quality bank, first editions. So I mean that should give a good idea that Midtown Comics had an abundance of Ultimate Fallout 4s. They probably had about 300 of them. Now let's say that Midtown kept those 300, just put them in a vault, and wanted to sell it. Fast forward to 2019, 2020. You could probably sell 300 of those, relatively $300 a pop, relatively safe. And that's me being very, very generous and low. And 300 times 300, well, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That's, what is that, like 90 grand?
I want to sell a $300 comic book.
But they probably gave away 300 to 400 of those books on Free Comic Book Day. Mm-hmm. We're talking about real money now. So obviously, but that's such a tangent. This entire interview has been a little bit of your book, like 15% of your book, and 85% tangents.
Yeah, you know what? I should probably let me say how great the rest of my team is. The next story, wherever we left off, was Roddy Honorado is doing the story where the machines just release us, and it doesn't really explain why. This is another WTF moment where you're just like, what is going on here? And if you look at his art, he's got like a very, very abstract style, and it's, I don't want to say trippy, but it's very surreal. And then the opposite is the next one. It's called Peacekeepers, and that's by Samrat Das, and he has like a very, very clean, very, very well practiced line art style where it's, very, very detailed and super, super rigid, just like the cop that is in it. It's a story about an anal cop, basically. And then Samuel is Amongst the Stars, and that's basically once humanity gets their reparations package, we're able to do whatever we want through technology again. And this guy goes into the Matrix basically, and he's a punk kid, and he learns, like, he's going from a very sheltered life to being in the Matrix. It's that one's very similar to the Matrix. Then the next one is, so Diogo is a very cool. Diogo Bertolin is the one who drew Indoctrination, which is the birth of the tribes on Earth under the embargo. And it's I'm just gonna let you read that one. It's really, really short, and I love it. I love it. I can't. The next one's longer, so he'll get to draw more. He didn't have enough pages in this one. And then Ramsay Sandoval does Poachers of Earth, and that is very self-explanatory. It's watching poachers hunt the manimals on Earth. And his art's great. I don't know if you saw him. He's it's a lot like he's definitely influenced by Mike Mignola. Ricardo Alves, he's doing Under the Embargo, which is set at the same time, kind of, but like the tribes are established, and it shows what it's like to live in the city there too. It's just like a portrait of New Earth under the embargo. And then the last, actually, I'm only going to tell you about one more, is by Samir Samau, and that's the one that takes place once the Regenesis story is already over. It's the only one that's after Regenesis.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with this book.
It's too much sometimes.
A lot of stuff's going on. Obviously, a lot of answers. We're not going to hash the anthology argument again. I promise.
I'm going to think about it. I'm standing by my Animatrix. I think the Animatrix example is a really good one where it's similar to mine because the stories have nothing to do with Neo, but they have everything to do with the Matrix. And that's the same with these. These have nothing to do with the Marshal, but it builds out the world. It's an anthology, bro.
We could agree to disagree. I think this is very much a world-building booster pack. And I think people utilize anthologies a little too much. I think people use that word as a crutch in comics.
What do you mean a crutch? Like that you think it's a good thing to advertise that you have a anthology? I feel like people don't like it as much. I think people would prefer a series.
So I think people want to call things an anthology because it puts their book into a different category.
Oh, for Amazon rankings?
What?
For Amazon rankings, you're definitely right. The anthology section in Amazon is under popular.
It's also a buzzword, right? So I'm not a marketing guy, but I understand marketing. If every once in a while, I get people who've gone to WWE and have gone out of WWE, and I put, I'm interviewing former WWE superstar. That's a buzzword, right? Because everybody knows and immediately connects it. And so I think people like to use anthology as a word because it either creates a negative reaction, it makes you happy, or you get an idea of what it is. But that's just how I feel, is that I think people overutilize a lot of words on Kickstarter because, well, let's be realistic, you got to get the rankings up on Facebook and Kickstarter, and it's a game. And that doesn't mean a book is an anthology or not. But if I put the word anthology in something and it gets me $500 more on my Kickstarter, I'm not going to complain.
I promise you that was not my logic here. My logic here was like,
I completely agree. And so, but it's, again, semantics. You can call your book whatever you want. It's not my fault.
Okay, thanks, bro.
No, but I wanted to challenge it because I think it's very.
No, it's good. That's good.
Because I from my perspective is that your thing is not the traditional anthology, and I think that's a fair statement in it, where because this is definitely more connected than something where somebody says, I want to have a Wonderland anthology, I want to have a Neverland anthology.
But there are canon Alice in Wonderland anthologies. Like
what I mean is that somebody takes a concept like Travis did, and I love Travis, where he has Cthulhu, and
those are wild. I like those a lot.
And those are great. I love Cthulhu.
Yeah, there's so much fun.
But certain things connect, certain things don't connect in that, or they don't connect well enough. This connects very well. Your book.
That disqualifies me from the anthology.
But anyway, I digress. So obviously I want to back out of this because, and I know you're brand new, but I am curious because I do like talking about Kickstarter, is where do you see Kickstarter going? Because it, not to make a pun, but your book is very much the Wild West to some degree, and Space is the Final Frontier. So is Kickstarter right now, because it is a very odd space And for I've never run a Kickstarter. I may or may not be thinking about running a Kickstarter campaign for this podcast.
Yeah, you should.
Everybody apparently is running everything on this stuff and running a bunch of crazy projects. But it's also the idea, just in the podcast realm, it is a freaking insane entity.
Yeah,
what people are asking. And comics are even crazier to some degree. And so where do you see this all going? Because obviously you're brand new, so you may not be as jaded as I am.
I'm in love with Kickstarter as like conceptually I am, because part of me at one point I didn't feel so hot on it. I was like, this is marked up prices for products that you have to wait to get. But then as I, started supporting Kickstarter projects, like it's really what it is people, instead of shopping, are being philanthropists. And it's, this is the way that art was made in the 12th century. Like, it's really, really, I love it. I think it's, there are a lot of people that are like addicted to the community. And, I don't want to say it's ever good to be addicted, but if you're going to be addicted to anything, philanthropy is what you're supporting the arts. If you support my book, you're buying a book, but like it says on the page, you're not buying any products. What you're doing is you're supporting artists. And I could not have made any of this without Kickstarter. So I'm incredibly grateful to it as a platform. Where it's going, I am too fresh, because I think, I do pay attention to the global economy, and the global economy is going to kind of determine what happens to Kickstarter. And that's unfortunate, because it's going to be bad, but it's going to be a global thing. So I really do think that Kickstarter will.
Me and somebody had a very, very interesting conversation where a bunch of people have been receiving unemployment. And this is going to lead into the next question. A bunch of people have been receiving a lot of money in the last few years. A bunch of people have not been going out. And people have said, oh, man, I made more money in 2020 and 2021 so far. And when I say, and I ask them, I say, okay, how much money do you spend at the bars every weekend? How much do you spend eating out? How much money did you, spend doing this? How much money did you spend, going to a convention? And somebody's like, oh, I have an extra $4,000. And I'm like, no, you always had the extra $4,000. It was just deployed very, very efficiently. And maybe you got 2 months of unemployment. Maybe you got some stimulus money. And maybe you didn't really need it, but you squeaked underneath the radar and you were comfortable and you got a little bit of this. And now all that's ending. And so I think that's also going to be very interesting with Kickstarter. And again, I'm not a finance guy either, but I just know how when you're in the collectible comic, industry and business and community, you see sort of trends. And I think that's going to affect Kickstarter.
It will. It will. I mean, you can already see the market reacting to cons reopening. It's been an immediate effect, because that was an income stream that a lot of creators,
that's another thing too,
fully dependent on, and it just vanished. And now people are that desperate to get it back. So like the Kickstarter market is definitely going to be affected by that, but I'm not so sure we're going back to normal just yet. I think there's, to talk COVID for a second, I think these next couple months are going to be really ugly.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know the answer to this, and I'm curious. So I love AwesomeCon. I've had 3 great years at AwesomeCon.
Wait, did you come down?
So when I was in DC, I loved it. I missed this year just economically. I wasn't good at it. It wasn't for me because I'm more susceptible to this because of physical disability. And when I get the flu, it's bad, and I don't really want to be around people so quickly. Because if I get COVID, it's gonna suck. Where I know exactly how it's gonna affect me. If it's anything like the flu, it's gonna be 15 times worse, and I'm gonna feel it, and I'm gonna be miserable. So
I can't risk it either. And I didn't go, but it was this weekend, and the pictures looked fantastic. They really.
So I was gonna ask you because that's sort of that answers my question. But I was wondering if you've gone to a con and a place like AwesomeCon. Because I've enjoyed myself at AwesomeCon. I've done amazing lectures at AwesomeCon. I've had a great time, and I've been treated very well in a lot of ways there as a fan panelist. But I was curious even where you feel about cons going, because I agree that we're not going back to normal, I think, till San Diego next year.
That'd be great. And I have high hopes, but I think the next cons are obviously coming back. There's no way that they're going away. It's going to change what they look like, but proof is in the pudding right now, because the con boom is all the cons that have chose to have limited reopenings or full reopenings. I think they've all done very well. I would hate to see the actual numbers related
when
to
we
it.
define very well, and I don't know the answer to this, and I would love data on it, is that did the attendance do well, but what was the expenditure like? What was the economic return for the vendors? What was the economic return? Because the cons, and I have an entire article where your con ticket goes. Nobody has read that article, and it's crazy. It's on my website, and I used to tweet out every single week, and nobody's read that article. But it's the idea. What basically builds a con is you have your guests, you have your vendors, and you have your comic creator signing. And then the fourth realm is that, and guess and indie, creators and comic creators are sort of the same. And then the fourth/third is fan panels. And if vendors aren't making money and they lose money, they're not coming back to the next one, or they're going to be more selective. If your celebrity guests aren't making money, they're not going to be happy. Versus also they get guarantees. And if their guarantees are not met, or their guarantees are missed by like $1,000, the con is going to rethink it. Okay. And then even with all these, comic guests, some of them are getting paid, some of them are taking, risks on their own. But if all of a sudden, guy does a commission and he's making $6,800 in a weekend, and now he's only making $4,800, it's a big issue, because there's less money in that. So.
And obviously, I haven't seen like complex cost analysis stuff, but it is very clear from all of the creators that I've talked to that they were successful at cons, and they had financial success as well as like a successful total overall experience. And like Awesome is a great example, because I was actually just studying them. Their guests were incredible, their venues, perfect. So like. If they lost money, I would have to I would call them a lot.
So I think
everything was perfect for AwesomeCon.
AwesomeCon 2019, I think, is killing it, but I don't know what it looked like in 2021, and that's what I'm curious about, because that is the real question, I think, for the next 10 months or so, because it could very well be that creators have benchmarks too, and so I'm hoping that a bunch of these people. But when I was speaking to Travis, and he was at a con earlier this year, I don't know, he was at MegaCon. We haven't spoken about MegaCon, but we were speaking. He said, well, people were just looking for what they needed.
They were buying? Oh, no.
So they were spending money, but they weren't, picking up a book that they wanted. They were picking up what they needed in their collection.
I know what you mean. Oh, that's too bad.
And so it's good if you're a vendor. So if you need a Starfire number 7, you're going to be wanting to pick that up. There's nothing wrong with that. Or if you need a DC Presents number 26, you might pick up a $140 book, but you're not picking up. You're at a con and you got an extra $1,000, and that's where I'm at. Is I'm extremely selective because money's tight in my life right now. I'm very cash poor. I have a battle plan, and when I ordered my comics yesterday in previews for November. It was $36. I was spending 6 months ago like $100 every single month, and then 3 months ago I dropped it down to about $60, and now it's down to $36, and I'm only getting what I need. I'm legitimately getting like 4 DC titles, a IDW title, and 3 independents. I am getting 11 books a month now, and I'm dropping down. I'm probably going to continue that till probably May or June of next year. So, and obviously money's getting reallocated, but I don't think I'm the only one. And so,
another thing is like for that said, I guess I don't have a lot of data on how the vendors did. The people that I know did very well, but one of the reasons I also have so much confidence in the con itself is because their guests must have taken breaks. Like the AwesomeCon, did you see who the headline guest was? Or it was the headline for me. They had Doc Brown and Marty McFly. Like that's an incredible grab, and like I can't imagine them getting that. I think that they must have got a break for price because, like, the stars want to get back on the road too. I don't think Michael J. Fox is hurting for money, but the reason he's doing it is to support the community. And I think that kind of support really, Awesome Con did great. I'm sure a large part because I know a lot of people who went there just because of that. And
yeah, no, I'm not doubting it at all. But
I'm sure they got a break on the venue too. Like all the venues are so strapped for cash. They're craving that kind of work, and they don't know how long it's going to last because if like COVID does take another downswing, they're going to be totally empty again for who knows how.
It's also that this is going to be affecting for the next 2 years.
Yeah,
and I am bunkering down because things have to change, but that's a whole separate issue, podcast discussion. But obviously, if you're an indie comic creator, I mean, this entire show is a complete reaction to COVID. And it's, I mean, this wasn't even, on the docket, legitly 20 months ago. I mean, I started the show in March and we are in August of 2020. So that's I'm really bad at math. So 20 months is just about right. So obviously this is a whole reaction and it's not stopping because I think this is the future. I think that the great digitalization pivot is here. And I think that if you're not part of it, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
So I think it's ultra important. I mean, tomorrow and Thursday, I'm taking a social media class. And then I have another one that's lined up, and it's going to be like 30 hours of learning how to master social media. And then obviously that's because I'm understanding that this is where things are going. So I think that, cons are not going to die, but they have to adjust.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the right attitude.
And I think if they don't have 20 to 30% on a digital space, I think that they're not going to die, but I think they're going to become very much semi-dinosaurs. And I think I wanted to make a pitch to Awesome Con. I threw it out to them, and they didn't want to be interested. And I said, guys, got to get digital. You have to enter this space, but you can't just ask because they were asking me for free panels to do digital shit, and they didn't want to pay me. And I'm like, you have to understand that you have to pay content creators. And it agitated me, and it's a big issue.
That's interesting. So they don't have. Did they do a virtual one last year?
They did a virtual thing, I think in May around Free Comic Book Day of 2020, and they wanted me to do some panels. They wanted it to be pre-recorded. They wanted it on their website or their Facebook page, and I would have done it if I was getting paid or if they gave me a free ticket.
Why'd they want it pre-recorded?
So I think they didn't know how to live stream it.
Oh, that is the thing. If you're gonna do a virtual con, it needs to. What you're trying to do is emulate the experience. You're trying to connect people, not have people watching videos. We can watch videos on our own time.
There are ways how to live stream a video, but the whole thing is that if you're not going to pay me and I'm giving you my content, I don't need your exposure anymore. I was legitimately just starting my show. I was doing about 9 to 10 episodes a month, and exposure would have been great, but I didn't need it at that point because legitimately for $30 on a Facebook ad, I got more exposure, and I did. So that was my problem, is that, and I think this is a big issue, is that you're running a Kickstarter. You want to be paid for your work.
Yeah, well, I'm a long way from being paid. I just want to pay all my illustrators.
But that's the thing too, is that you don't expect your comic artist not to work for free.
Oh, hell no.
Now, you expect them to if you got a big name, maybe to give you a slight discount and say, look, I got 19 other people, and can you be more reasonable? That's a different discussion.
No, yeah, and I think I was watching a panel with Travis Gibb was talking about how he's also very good about paying his artists, except it's impossible to do for anthologies because it's just too many people. It's really hard to pay everybody up front.
If Travis gave me a spot and then he said, hey, look, I'm going to help you write something and I'll give you a 4-page, I just want a credit. And that's the other thing too, is that I'm brand new into the comic world. I've never written one. If I have an idea, and look, maybe you want to give somebody a credit, or maybe what you want to do is give them 3 books as comps, or give them 5 books as comps. There's a lot of ways how to take care of somebody, and it's getting creative. I could think of 15 ways how to get creative on how to get paid. hate to say this and I point something out, but I'm getting paid for what's going on the bottom of my screen right now.
Yeah. And dude, I yeah, that's fucking fantastic.
I'm getting paid, and that's an open option now where I'm getting a live read and I'm getting paid for that. And I'm going to continue to do this. And I could think of 15 other ways how to monetize this, plus my sponsorship. So obviously, and I think with indie comics, if somebody said, hey, I'll give you a piece of my anthology, I'll give you a 2-pager, and I'll help you write it a little bit, I'll give you some guidance. If I can't pay you, I'll give you 2 books off the deal, and I'm going to give you a credit. And that, you want to build your name, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, get your name on it.
I got no problem working for free on that realm if you give me 2 pages.
That reminded me of 2 things. I gotta mention 4 more people, and then I'll tell you a funny story about one of them. I have 2 colorists that are doing, a lot of the illustrators are doing their own colors, but I have 2 that are working, and that's Shamsuddin Idris and Julius Daiwan. They're both fantastic, really, really fast and incredibly talented. And I also have 2 letterers, Stephen S.K. and Tom Wallace. And they're both also amazing. But the funny story about Tom is that I hired him. He put a post up on Facebook and was like, hey, I'm looking to do some lettering work for free. I just want to build my portfolio. And it was so good that I was like, I'm obviously paying you for this. But he was willing to go out there and work without getting paid. And that's like
8 years.
It'll get you like, so now he's doing fantastic work for me, and I'm obviously paying him for everything. So like, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. You get on the right team and you find the right person for your team, and it's golden. Thanks, Tom. You're fantastic. You're really good at your job.
And so obviously there's a lot there, and it's a whole another episode too. And then, oh my God, I've gone for an hour. And then I was on Livid Comics this thing. We spoke about this for like 30 minutes on how to get creative, because I find that comic creators are some of the most creative people on paper, and they are some of the least creative people when they're marketing.
Oh, yeah, guilty again. I hate marketing. I just want to write the sci-fi. Just let me do the sci-fi part.
And so obviously we could go on forever, but obviously we spoke about a lot of things I want to speak about. There's a million other questions I want to have, and I'm sure that I'm going to speak to you after off the air and then try to make you another like $1,500 at a convention with minor tweaks. That's off charts here. But
I'll pay you for that.
I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote. So where can people find you? Obviously, for those who are still watching, checking out, links are up above for the Kickstarter. Obviously, where can people find you though? Find the Kickstarter. Where can people find you on Twitter? Where can people check out your Facebook pages, anything else you're doing, any other projects you're involved in? And, obviously, where can they keep up to date with you as well?
I'm going to lay off the other projects, but fortunately for all of these I'm not really using Twitter, but Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are all at Frontier Forever. So it's really easy. And then it's frontierforever.org. If you lose the link to anything, it's all hyperlinked there. It's not a very big website. It just has links to to the Kickstarter and to the social media. Yeah, come and see us on, if there's not enough art for you on the Kickstarter page, go to the Instagram. It's just, we post something every day. It's looking really good right now because we got so many artists pumping out such good work. Come check us out. Frontier Forever, at Frontier Forever, everywhere.
And then I've been saying this, and I'm going to keep saying this, you have to support indie. And what that means is that first and foremost, you have to back Kickstarters. Now, I personally don't care if you back digital or you back physical. It doesn't matter to me. Obviously, I'm sure, creators, and I'm not a creator, would prefer the higher tiers, but every dollar amount matters. Mm-hmm. Even backing and throwing $1 or $2 goes a long way, and it makes a huge difference. And so I really encourage everybody to say, hey, let me go back, something, and throw $3 here or buy a $5 digital. It goes a long way. So that's the first and foremost. But even going beyond that, what you need to do is you need to follow people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you need to share things out. It makes a huge difference when you share something, because you never know who's watching, when they're watching. And look, a bunch of projects get lost in the radar. And so they're like, oh man, this is awesome. I didn't even know this existed. So that's obviously a big thing that goes a long way. So I recommend that people do that. And then even going beyond that, once people have certain books and have a few series, you might not like their current Kickstarter, but you should go and pick up their other books if you haven't already checked it out, because that indirectly supports them as well. And then even just about me, obviously, Mixum is a sponsor, and if you use my name, you get 5% off your order. And so if you're running a Kickstarter, you're promoting your Kickstarter, that's a big deal, and 5%, every percentage counts now.
It really does.
If you have a $2,000 order, 5% is a decent amount of money, and that means that you could maybe print another, 20 books. And obviously, if you turn that $20, that 20 books into a bigger price point. Also, they're very good at printing, and there's a bunch of people that I was on that has used them, and they're a very good company, and they've done a lot of good work for a lot of good people. So obviously, check that out. But let's say that you want to just support this show and you want to do it yourself, and you are not using Mixum right now, or you don't have a Kickstarter running, you can go buy me a coffee. That is up there as well, and it's very much like a Patreon. And all that money does go back into this show. So obviously that's another way how to support. But as I've been saying, please go back Kickstarters. Please go support indie. Also just sharing this makes a huge difference, because again, you never know who's watching, when they're watching, how they're watching, and all that stuff. So obviously that's all I have to promote. And then I'm going to give you the final word.
Read my books. That's really all I'm here for. Oh, I was going to say, that's why the digital tiers are also cheap, is because we really just want you to read these. It really, really helps to have you just get the digital copy and read it. I would love to, I would rather have 100 of you buy $1 copies than I would have one person buy $100 copy. I just want more people to read these books. They're really fun. It's wild and it's crazy and it's hard to understand sometimes, but it does make sense, I promise. You're really going to like it. Please check us out.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said that any better myself. And so I believe that is a wrap.